Evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Ann Glazer-Nyron, and I am the curator of Jewish collections here at the Filson. So if you don't know what I do, in a nutshell, which would take way too long to explain, but in addition to working on and stewarding the Jewish collections here, I perform outreach to the Jewish community and I help put on programs just like these. So we thank you for joining us here tonight, which is our program is held in observance of Holocaust Remembrance Day. Thank you again for joining us for My Holocaust Legacy, a Blessing, Not a Burden. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to remind everyone to please silence your cell phones. Originally from Terre Haute, Indiana, Dr. Alex Kaur is the son of two Holocaust survivors, Michael and Eva Moses Kaur. He has a bachelor's of science in chemistry from Butler University and a master's degree in exercise physiology from Purdue University. He earned his doctor of podiatric medicine from the Scholl College of Podiatric Medicine in Chicago. Dr. Kaur is a full-time podiatrist at Hendricks Regional Health in Danville, Indiana, and is a clinical assistant professor for Marian University College of Osteopathic Medicine. Knowing the importance of being the son of two Holocaust survivors who have both passed away in the last 5.5 years, Alex feels an obligation to tell their stories. Since 1985, he has traveled to Auschwitz more than 25 times with his late mother. He is a member of Candles Holocaust Museum and Education Center Board of Directors and assisted in establishing an exhibit at the Indiana Historical Society, Eva Kaur from Auschwitz to Indiana, to honor his mother. Graham Honecker serves as Associate Athletic Director for Development and NIL Strategy at Butler University, where he is in his 12th year. He has worked on various campaigns at Butler, including the campaign for Hinkle Fieldhouse and the Butler Beyond campaign, the largest campaign in university history. He has an undergraduate degree from Wake Forest University and a master's degree from Indiana University. In addition to A Blessing, Not a Burden, he has co-authored 2 books, The Cinderella Strategy, The Game Plan Behind Butler University's Rise to Prominence, and Unbracketed, Big Time College Basketball Done the Right Way. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Alex Kaur and Mr. Graham Honecker.
Well, good evening. It's really great to be here. I first want to thank Ann. She's been planning this event for months, and Alex and I are notoriously difficult to work with, so I appreciate you putting up with us. Since the book came out last May, Alex and I have been speaking all over the country, and we even spoke in Europe last summer. This is a really special one for me, though. I spent 10 years of my life living here. I still call it Louisville. I know that's wrong. But I have a lot of family, a lot of roots here. And my grandfather, Gordon Snyder, was a longtime member of the Filson Club. Also, some people, really, I'm going to miss some people here, I know, but I have several of my greatest mentors here. Councilman Kevin Kramer in the back. Raise your hand. Nelson Clemens is over here. Nelson, longtime friend. Dean Charlie Moyer and his wife Sally are here. Jane Goldstein has been an amazing mentor for me. I know many of you know Jane. She kind of runs the town and ran U of L for many decades, but I would not be where I'm at career-wise without Jane. So thank you for being here. I have other good friends. I see Karen in the back, my cousin Scott, Aaliyah, my Aunt Barb. Barb, I didn't want to miss you. And really special to me, my cousin Daryl Snyder, who's with his mom, Mary Elizabeth. I can tell you, someday there'll be another book that I write about you. It'll be nonfiction, I promise. I wouldn't be up here standing without his friendship and support over the years. So thank you again for having us. Great crowd. I'm going to speak briefly because this is really Alex's story and his family's story. And I hope you see after he speaks, this is the most amazing, remarkable story of triumph and hope that I've ever been around. But I want to set the stage in terms of setting up how this project began and how my friendship with Alex really came to be. So I've been at Butler University now going on my 13th year. And when you're in fundraising, Jane knows this well because she did this to me when I first got to Louisville. They give you a big list of names. And they say, go out and I don't care if it's cash, check, or card, get money from them. And when I got to Butler, I didn't know anyone when I moved to Indianapolis, and I got this big list and started calling people, and once in a while they'd actually return my call. And I saw this name, Dr. Alex Core. And Alex lived in Baltimore, Maryland at the time, and wrote him a letter and said, could we get together for dinner? And it took a while, but, and he almost tore that letter up. He probably wishes he had, maybe after working with me for so long. But he said, sure, I'll meet you. And my research, before I meet with a donor, I always take a lot of pride in getting to know who they are before I first sit down with them. And, LinkedIn and researching what was their major at Butler and their career path. And right away, when I started researching Alex, I said, this is going to be different, because I started reading about his mother, Eva Core, and this amazing story of this diminutive woman who had been a Mengele twin and survived the unimaginable at Auschwitz. And my preparation, at that point, I stopped paying attention to Alex. All my preparation up until that point when I met him was listening to his mom's lectures. Again, this incredible journey, how after 50 years, she came to forgive the Nazis, the unimaginable. So Alex and I met, and he knew I was going to pay the bill, and of course, picked the most expensive restaurant in Baltimore. And we sat down that night. Again, this was about 12 years ago. And we developed a great rapport from the onset. We both love college athletics, and we talked about his home of Indiana. And then we finally started talking about his mother. But what I didn't realize is that his father was also a survivor. And his father, as you'll listen to tonight, had this equally incredible story of surviving multiple Holocaust camps and very narrowly escaping death. At the end of the dinner, Alex didn't write me a check. He actually still hasn't. Charlie, that was probably my reputation as a development guy. Maybe someday he'll make a donation back to his alma mater. But he made a really interesting comment. He said, my mother has spoken all over the world, but she's never spoken back at Butler University. And I thought, how is that possible? Because at that time, his mother was 79, and she was still speaking all over the world. So I went back to campus, and I sat down with our president, and I said, no, I didn't get a check from him, but let me tell you this amazing story. And about 2 weeks later, I got an email, and it said, hey, I'm pleased to let you know, from the president, who said, I'm pleased to let you know Eva Core is going to be our commencement speaker. And we're going to give her an honorary degree. So really quickly, I felt great about that, because I had fulfilled, I think, something that Alex really wanted. And if you're ever looking for inspiration, go to YouTube and put in Butler University Commencement Address 2015. That's when his mother spoke to us. Hinkle Fieldhouse is where we play basketball. It's a very famous arena. Nelson, Charlie, a couple others have been there. That's also where we hold our commencement exercises. And so there were 9,000 people on this Saturday morning. And we had 1,000 graduates that day. And again, I think, Alex, your mother was 5 feet maybe. I was telling this story of how, again, she survived Auschwitz and went on to forgive the Nazis. But what I remember the most is at the end, she looked the 1,000 graduates in the eye and she said, when you go home tonight, I want you to hug your parents. Not just because they paid a lot of money for you to come here to Butler University, but because when I, quote unquote, graduated from Auschwitz, when it was liberated, I was looking around for my parents and they weren't there. Parents had been executed right when they got to Auschwitz. And Alex was sitting right in the front row, and she motioned to him to come up, and she goes, now I'd like to give my son a hug. And when I tell that story, I still get goosebumps to this day. I've seen a lot of great basketball games in Hinkle Fieldhouse, not so many in the last couple years, but that's my all-time favorite memory there. As our friendship grew, so did our work to honor his parents' legacies. We created a scholarship in his mother's honor at Butler. We created one for his father in his father's honor at Purdue. We worked on a documentary with our good friend Ted Green. And then about coming up on 2 years, Alex and I get together every once in a while for dinner. We talk about college athletics, his dating life. He's single, if you know anyone. Great guy. Um, but he said, he goes, I've long wanted to write this book, a memoir about my life as the son of two Holocaust survivors. And I had just come off of writing 2 books, and I was really burnt out. And I was kind of mad at him too, because he'd been saying this for the 10 years that I knew him about wanting to write a book. And I looked him in the eye and I said, we're either going to do this or you're going to quit talking about it. And the next day I drafted about 20 questions and I sent it to him, and that's how the ball got rolling. Next month will be the 1-year anniversary of the book. I'm very pleased that it's on its 3rd printing. I'm really grateful my mom has bought a lot of copies to make that possible. But before I turn it over to Alex, I want to just share a couple of my motivations for this project. And again, we've lectured all over the country on this book. And when the book was published, I told Alex, I said, look, this is your story. It's your family's story. I don't need to be up there with you. And he said, no, it's really important you are up there with me because I'm not Jewish. And he wanted for us to present from a multi-faith platform. And that's what we've done. But I have had a couple motivations. The first one being the incredible and sad rise of anti-Semitism around the world. Anti-Semitic events, violent attacks have been up more than 300% over the last couple of years. We've seen it worldwide. We've seen it in our hometown of Indianapolis. We've had a synagogue that swastikas were spray painted on it a couple of years ago. Just a couple of weeks ago in Carmel, Indiana, I think Jane has family there maybe, there was anti-Semitic literature distributed. If we were to drive right now about halfway between here and, again, our hometown of Indy, we'd be in a place called Paoli, Indiana. You might know where Paoli is, but you might not know one of the country's largest Holocaust deniers lives there. And he was one of the people that led the Charlottesville rally in 2017. I still remember vividly, January 6, 2021, one of the protesters wearing a Camp Auschwitz t-shirt and laughing about it. You may remember that as well. And I thought, here is my best friend. This is not a joke. So the rise in anti-Semitism, a big motivation for me in this project and why we've been speaking. Second one, the surveys are staggering and sad about how little younger generations know about the Holocaust. I have a 13 and 16-year-old. I hope they're back home studying right now because they've got a lot of homework and exams coming up. But I really wanted to also write this book for them. It's so important that these generations know about what happened. And it's so important that Alex and the children of survivors continue to tell these stories. A third motivation was to tell Alex's story. Again, many, many people worldwide knew about his mom, not as many people about his dad, but a lot of people don't know what Alex went through growing up, the anti-Semitism that he faced. So Alex is not only a friend of mine, but he's a hero in his own right, and I wanted to tell his story. I also wanted to write this book because of forgiveness. We can't fathom what it was like to be in Auschwitz or in Buchenwald, where his parents were, but I think everybody in our lives, we're trying to forgive someone. And I hope you hear tonight about his mom's amazing journey of forgiveness, that if she could forgive the Nazis, perhaps we can forgive somebody in our own life as well. One of the things, and we can take the question in the Q&A, but we're really excited that a couple months ago we found out the book is going to be adapted into a motion picture, which is really exciting for us. We're not sure Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise will be playing the part of Alex, but again, if you've read the book, I hope you enjoy it. We've got copies here at the end. We donate the proceeds to Mrs. Core's scholarship at Butler and to the Candles Museum that his parents founded in Terre Haute. But take a copy, give it to somebody who needs some inspiration, some hope, finding forgiveness. Again, it's the most amazing story that I've ever been a part of, and now I'm honored to turn it over to Dr. Alex Core.
Good evening. Want to say thanks to Ann. This is amazing, Scott, and your entire staff. Graham's done a great job with this, and I wouldn't be here without Graham. I know my mom lectured here at least once or twice. Tonight, I hope you'll leave here inspired. Hopefully, you'll leave here motivated. Some of you may cry. I usually cry a little bit. But I think I would be doing my parents a big injustice because my parents had this incredible sense of humor. And despite the topic that you're going to hear about, I think my parents would be a little upset with me if here and there you didn't have a chuckle. So don't be surprised if some of these stories will make you laugh. But what I'm going to tell you is not easy for me to talk about. It's definitely not easy for you to hear. And quite frankly, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I'm a full-time podiatrist. I never thought I'd be doing this. July the 2nd, 2019, during one of our trips to Auschwitz, it was late at night. We had been in Auschwitz the whole day. My mom would take trips back with anywhere from 50 to 100 people every summer. And I said, Mom, you're 85 years old. Maybe it's time for you to slow down. And she looked at me, she said, Alex, slow down. How can I slow down? There's so much hatred, bigotry in the world, racism, anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, my work is needed more than ever. And that was July 2nd, 2019. Unfortunately, 2 mornings later, in that same room, my mom passed away during our trip. And really, one of the things I regret the most is I never had that conversation with my mom what my role should be. So I always think back to that conversation 2 nights earlier. Maybe that's kind of my beck and calling. So, for the most part, a lot of people will ask about the title. There's a couple reasons, for the title. And, a lot of us, we look back at the past, and I think all of us here in this audience are a product of our past. And when I was in podiatry school, I was 26 years old, and I was diagnosed with cancer. It had spread to my lung, and I thought I was going to die. My mom, I was going to podiatry school in Chicago, and it was the old days of the voicemail, and she kept on leaving voicemails, and I would hit delete, delete, delete. And so finally one got through, and she goes, I know you're there. Quit feeling sorry for yourself. Look, your dad's a survivor. I'm a survivor. You're going to be a survivor. This is your Auschwitz. And when I heard those words, I really thought, yeah, I need to quit. I cried all day. I thought, well, it spread to my lung. I'm probably going to die. And so, the old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And for me, knowing that my parents had survived this terrible thing that we're going to talk about, really for me was a great source of strength and perseverance. And I truly believe it made it much easier for me to get through a very, very difficult time. And so we're going to talk a little bit about my dad, a little bit about my mom, a little bit about me. There's some life lessons, and then hopefully at the end you could ask both Graham and I questions. And so I am the son of 2 Holocaust survivors. My father we're going to talk about first. My father was from Riga, Latvia, one of the Baltic states. My dad was from a very religious Jewish family. As I told you, I'm a podiatrist. My grandfather, I did not know this when I went to podiatry school, my grandfather was a shoe cobbler. So I guess shoes and feet run in the family, or as I tell some of my patients, there's no business like toe business. Okay, you guys are awake. That's good. So 1941 rolls around, and the Nazis invade Riga. And my father was 14, 15 years old. His 3 older brothers were into their 20s. And my grandfather was on his way to work and dressed in very traditional Jewish garb. They were very religious. And restrictions were already in place. And they said, you need to go to that side of the street. They knew he was Jewish. And he kept on walking. They killed him right on the spot. My dad's oldest brother, Zori, was in the Baltic Sea, part of the Latvian Navy. They found out he was Jewish, and they killed him and threw him overboard. So within a very short period of time, at the age of 14 or 15, my father lost his father and his oldest brother. The family was taken from their home to a ghetto It's not like a ghetto that obviously we think about in the United States. Basically, they were taken there to be killed. Barbed wire, minimal shelter, minimal food. My dad could see his apartment from the ghetto, but he could not come and go. This is a little wordy. It's my dad's first interview when he was talking about the ghetto. One of the things that my grandmother did, just to give you an idea of what it meant to be Jewish and how important it was for Jewish customs, on Shabbat dinner, us Jews have Shabbat dinner. So the last thing that my grandmother took from the house, the apartment, into the ghetto, she put it in her dress, was a tablecloth. And my dad would tell me the story when I was a little kid. So on Shabbat dinner, there was no table, there was very little silverware, but she put the tablecloth on the ground. So that way my dad and the two other brothers could have some semblance of Shabbat dinner. And so this is how life started in the ghetto. At one point, they're going to liquidate the ghetto. What does that mean? They're going to decide who's going to live and who's going to die. And typically, when this would occur, they would put women, elderly, and young children on one side of the ghetto, and men and younger men that could work on the other side of the ghetto. My dad was, like I said, 14 or 15. He was kind of a mama's boy. So he went to the side of the ghetto with his mother, my grandmother. The two other brothers, Leo and Shlomo, went to the side with the men that would work. My grandmother knew what was going to happen. She knew that the women, elderly, young children would be killed. So she told my dad, you go with your two brothers. He said, no, if they kill you, my life will not be worthwhile to live. She says, no, you go with your brothers. So finally, and obviously, my grandmother won that argument. My dad went with brother Leo and Shlomo to the other side. On November the 30th, 1941, near the Rumble of Forest, which is a forest not far from the ghetto, there was a big massacre. That's where my grandmother died. Young children, elderly, and women. 2 or 3 days later, my dad went to the site of the massacre and found a baby doll. When Graham and I were there this past summer, almost a year ago, I put a baby doll at the side of the memorial. And so now my dad's in the labor camp. At one point, Shlomo, the second oldest brother, is on a work detail. And they tell him, you carry this log to the end of the field, and when you come back, I kill you. My uncle Shlomo killed a Nazi and went to Eretz Israel, future homeland of Israel. But the two brothers, my uncle Leo and my dad, didn't know what happened to him. So now for the next 4 years, my father and Leo in a variety of camps. They were in Kaiserwald and then Stutthof. Stutthof is near Gdansk, Poland. Very, very few people survive Stutthof. And then I'll reset the time and the place, and now it's February, March of 1945. My dad now was taken from Stutthof down to Germany. They're near Buchenwald, which is a big camp. And so now it's April of 45. My dad could sense that the Nazis were losing the war. Their demeanor was poor. Their mood was bad. My dad would tell me he didn't like the Nazis when they were winning the war. He sure as heck didn't like them when they were losing the war. So now my dad and my uncle Leo are on a death march after being on a work detail. They were being told, we're taking you to safer ground. My dad didn't believe him. And so my father and my uncle Leo were walking, and if you stepped out or if you fell, you were killed right away. And they were going on a ravine, and it was getting dusk out. And my father said, what the heck, they're going to kill us anyway. I'm going to make a go for it. When my dad told the story years later, particularly to kids, all the stories were in sports analogies, and you'll find out why in a second. So my dad first started telling the story. The Indianapolis Colts had a running back named Edgerrin James. So he ran from the bullets like Edgerrin James was running to dodge tacklers. He ran and ran and ran. He finds an old building and hides in the ruins of a building. Now there's fierce fighting. He's now worried that he's going to get killed by a grenade or errant gunshot, so he keeps on hiding. He has lice all over him. His clothes are raggedy. And then for the next several hours, he hears silence. And my dad was great with languages. So all of a sudden he starts hearing this language, and the rumor was that the Americans were in the area to liberate. So after hearing this language, he comes up with his hands up, 2 American GIs, one named Wendell Knox from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, give my dad a Coca-Cola. When I was a little kid years later, I didn't know what Pepsi was. We had Coca-Cola breakfast, lunch, and dinner. True story. So my dad drinks the Coca-Cola, and they said, how's it feel to be free? My dad knew the word free, and he said, good. A week ago, last week, April 15th, was 80 years to the day that my dad was liberated. Ironically, it's my birthday. I'm only 25, but what the heck. So my dad is liberated by the 2 American GIs. They're part of a battalion that's building bridges. They thought that their superior officer would think of my father as a liability. He was a Holocaust survivor. So they hid him for a couple days. And then on the 3rd day, Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Neff found out about my dad. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Neff was from this place called Terre Haute, Indiana. He was an engineer. He went to Rose Poly, now Rose Holman, and he was in charge of this battalion that was mainly building bridges. So the initial thought was, we're going to put my dad in a refugee camp. But Mr. Neff interviews my dad, and he knew all the various dialects. He could serve as a translator. He knew the terrain. He could help. And they said, well, he's not going to be a liability. He's going to be an asset. So they put him in GI clothes. And for a better part of 3 or 4 weeks, he was part of this battalion. Now we're into early May, and they do then encounter a battle. And Mr. Neff tells my dad, Mickey, you don't know how to use a gun. I know you've got GI clothes on, but we have no choice but to put you in a refugee camp. So my dad looks at Mr. Neff and he says, I want to go where you're from, wherever this Terre Haute, Indiana is. So my father is then put in a refugee camp, and he starts writing letters. And one of the letters ends up on the doorstep, not this letter. One of the letters ends up on the doorstep of Mrs. Neff in Terre Haute, Indiana. She telegrams her husband, who's now in England, and says that you got to help that little boy. Now, by now, my dad's 19 or 20. So Mr. Neff then telegrams the GIs and says, go find him in the refugee camp because I'm going to try to get him to Terre Haute. To Terre Haute. I told you I cry every now and then. So my father, then the GIs come to the refugee camp, and for the better part of a year, my dad would hang out with the GIs in bars and restaurants. If you look closely here, and you can't see it, that's a Coca-Cola malt. Everything's Coca-Cola. And so Mr. Neff now is back in Indiana. My dad's 4 years of high school, well, 4 years of concentration camp and ghettos. So Mr. Neff is in Terre Haute trying to encourage the Vigo County School Corporation to admit my father. So these letters start going back and forth. This is my dad's letter to Mr. Neff. My dad picked up English, just amazing, and we can come back to this at the end. There's a reason why. But they were writing letters, so Mr. Neff was taking the letters to the educators and administrators in Terre Haute. So by May of 46, my father has convinced the Vigo County School Corporation he could be admitted. So May 11th, 1946, he gets on a boat called the SS Marine Flasher, 700 Holocaust survivors from Germany to New York, takes a train to Terre Haute. My dad, on a good day, 5'2", on a really good day. So when he was a little boy, he played soccer in Riga. Well, here in Louisville or in Terre Haute in 1946 or 7, there ain't no soccer. There's basketball, at least in Indiana. Probably here in Louisville too. I know there's a lot of U of L fans here. And so my father goes to high school, and everybody's talking about basketball, and he becomes very curious, and he wants to fit in, and he wants to understand American culture. Well, he tests out of high school after 1 year. He doesn't have to go. He graduates in 1 year. And then he enrolls at Indiana State Teachers College, which is now Indiana State University. And he's very excited because he finds out in his classes that first semester is the gym class. The gym class is being taught by the basketball coach. And he said, oh, good. I'm going to learn how to play basketball. Well, that basketball coach, some of you may know, in 1946, some guy by the name of John Wooden. So Coach Wooden, if you know his story, was from Martinsville, Indiana, was an All-American at Purdue, first high school job in South Bend. This was his first college job, and he was my dad's gym teacher. So my dad, again, on a good day, 5'2", Coach Wooden would teach my dad hook shots. And my dad was very ambitious because he wanted to get an A because he wanted to go to pharmacy school. So Mr. Coach Wooden realized he's studying all the time. Nobody studies in his gym class except my dad. So he takes my dad aside one day, says, Mickey, you're going to get an A. I know you got to get an A, but you're such a good influence on these younger kids. I need you to take the class next semester. And my dad said, okay, you're going to get an A that next semester. So they became friends. And if you know the story, Coach Wooden then goes to UCLA. My dad goes to pharmacy school at Purdue. Several years later, they were reunited. My mom took this picture. I was not there. There was another guy being honored that night in Terre Haute, some guy, I don't know if you've heard of him, Larry Bird. So Coach Wooden and Larry Bird were honored, and my dad sat at Coach Wooden's table. They hadn't seen each other for almost 50 years. So that's my dad's story. Now we're going to kind of switch gears. I don't have any horse racing emblems. This is all with the Indy 500, so I apologize. So my mom's story, and I was talking to somebody earlier, my mom and my dad did not know each other at all during the war. My mom was from the Transylvanian Valley, Hungary, Romania, also from a very religious Jewish family. There were two older girls, Edith and Elise, and my grandfather, who I'm named after, Alexander, was hoping against hope. His wife was pregnant again. Hopefully it would be a boy. So there's no ultrasound. The midwife comes to deliver. Out comes a girl, Miriam. She says, oh, wait, there's another one coming. And with great disappointment, my mom enters into the world. And so they were twins, identical twins. Picture on the left there. They always dressed alike, looked alike. For whatever reason, almost every picture, my mom's on the left, my aunt's on the right. So the family, again, very religious. Just to give you an idea, this is a Transylvanian Valley. When my mom was 5 or 6 years old, she can remember being in a horse and buggy, and her mother said, see those castles up there? Don't ever go in a castle because there's bad people there. My mom had heard of Count Dracula, even though he wasn't from the same immediate valley. And if you know history, Hungary, Romania was supposedly going to be saved from the Nazis. They were not going to invade. 1940, my mom remembers after dinner one night, and she was always a troublemaker. The girls were put in a room to play with dolls, and their parents were listening to the radio. And my mom puts her ear to the radio and hears somebody in German yelling things against the Jews. It was Hitler. So she realized, even the age of 5 or 6, that there was a problem. So she said, Daddy, we should leave. We should go. And my grandfather said, oh, stupid little girl, you don't know what you're talking about. He did go in 1941 with his brother to Israel, to Palestine, to see what it would be like, just in case things got bad in Hungary, Romania. He came back very excited and said, yeah, I think we should consider it. My grandmother said, well, how can we leave? We have these 2 6-year-old twins. There's no way we can travel. And my mom always held that against my parents, her parents, my grandparents. And then sure enough, in 1942, 43, as the Nazis started losing the war, they invade. My mom's teacher, my mom and my aunt's teacher, was replaced by a Nazi sympathizer. And my mom remembers a math equation. If you have 5 Jews and you kill 2 Jews, how many Jews are left? My mom and my aunt went back to their mom and said, Mommy, how come we have to take this? And my grandmother said, well, we just have to take it because we're Jewish. We don't have a choice. And then sure enough, in 1944, March, April, they were taken, put in a ghetto, similar to my dad's story, put on a cattle car. Nobody told them where they were going. There was no sign to this place. There were over 100 people per cattle car with a little peephole, and ever so often the cattle car would stop to be refueled. The only way they got water was for exchange 5 gold watches and anything gold. And then on the last day, the language was always in Hungarian. On the last day when they exchanged for the little spritz of water, the language was in German. And my mom and her father, my grandfather, knew they were in trouble. So now the cattle car is again slowing down, but it's a little early for refueling. And Sure enough, the cattle car doors open to this here. This is the selection platform at Auschwitz. My mom doesn't know where she's at. It's dark, dogs barking, people screaming, crying, gunshots, people yelling. So my mom and my aunt step off the selection platform holding on to their mother's arms. As she steps down to the selection platform, my mom then looks around and sees that her father is no longer there. He disappears, gets swallowed up into the crowd. The same thing with her two older sisters, no idea where they're at. So now my mom and my aunt holding onto their mother's arms, looking around, somebody's running up and down the selection platform yelling, "Twins, twins," in German. My mom and my aunt looked alike, dressed alike. A Nazi approached my grandmother and said, "Are they twins?" And before she could say the word yes, they're taken out of their mother's arms. My mom would be here. If she were here, she would tell you the one thing she regrets is that she never was able to say goodbye. She did not know this was the last time she would see her mother. Nobody told her this. So then my mom and my aunt are taken to a barracks. My aunt is tattooed. Her number is A7064. My mom's number is A7063. They're then taken to a barracks with all twins. It was kind of strange. And my mom didn't understand. There's girl twins aged 3 to 13. My mom and my aunt were raised to be kosher. And so they brought out something that looked like bread. And my mom and my aunt said, "Well, we're not eating this because we keep kosher, and we're not eating this until we see our parents. So show us our parents." So one of the older twins says, "See the smoke in the distance? That's where your parents are." And my mom said, "Oh, that's crazy. Who would be burning bodies?" And one of the older twins said, "Oh, you'll find out tomorrow. You'll meet the person responsible, Dr. Joseph Mengele." So my mom soon found out the next morning. Somebody comes in from his entourage, "Mengele's coming, Mengele's coming." So all the twins stand at attention like little toy soldiers. And Mengele was inspecting his new victims, his new guinea pigs. My mom and my aunt were two of those. So you might ask, what was the purpose of these experiments? Was there informed consent? Well, of course, there was no informed consent. I'm a podiatrist. When I talk to patients about a procedure, I give them information about what to expect, complications, etc. My mom and all the other twins, 3,000 twins, boys and girls, were never given informed consent. Nobody told them, "You're injected with something," or "We're putting something here." Their body parts were measured. They would lie on tables for hours, boys and girls, body parts measured, injections, blood drawn. If one twin died during the experiments, they would kill the other twin and do comparative autopsies. So this picture here, it's hard to see, but numbers 12 and 13 are my mom. That's the Moses last name. Again, this was all done without informed consent. This is from the Auschwitz State Museum. And this experiments, my mom got to Auschwitz in May of 44. If you just compare pain, if you will, my dad had already been in camps for 3.5 years. So 5, 6, 7 days a week, they were part of the experiments. A couple anecdotal stories. In August of 44, one day there was no guard tower in front of my mom's barracks, so she got up and looked around. Again, she's 10 years old. She sees a plane circling Auschwitz with a smoke signal. She sees on the back of the plane the American flag. Now, when I heard this story when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I said, "Wait a second. How do you know it's an American flag? There's no TV. There's no internet. How would you know that?" Well, she said, "Alex, my dear, when I was a little girl back in Romania, we got a letter from our aunt in Cleveland, Ohio, every 3 months. And on the letter was an American stamp. My mom put 2 and 2 together. On the back of the plane was the same thing as a stamp. The reason I tell you this is my mom would tell you that every day she could not think like a 10-year-old. Every day she had to think like an adult, because unfortunately it was another day possibly to live, another possible day to die." The experiments continued through the fall. And then one other story, in around November, December, one time the Nazis were not in the towers for a couple of days, and my mom and the other twins were hungry. So in camp language, that was called organizing food, which meant steal food. So my mom and 2 other twins go to the kitchen to organize food, and they put a bunch of potatoes in their skirt and turn around, and they hear a Jeep pull up. The Jeep, not the good guys. They turn around, there's two Nazis, soldiers spraying bullets. The last thing my mom remembers is the rifle pointed at her head. And she then thinks she's in heaven. She wakes up and she touches the two bodies, they're ice cold. So she quickly realized what had happened was she fainted when the bullet was about to hit her. When I was a little kid, she would tell, my sister and I, this is a reason I think I have a guardian angel. So she would always tell us she had a guardian angel. This is one of the proofs. So shortly thereafterwards, those same two Nazis, my mom then went back to the barracks and had to tell the other two twin girls that unfortunately their sisters had died. Those same two Nazis found all the female twins and took them on a death march from Auschwitz II, which is Birkenau, back to Auschwitz I, which is 5 kilometers, 3.1 miles. They get to Auschwitz I, the Nazis disappear, the girls run into a barracks to seek shelter, and they can hear fighting in the distance, similar to my dad's story. And then, and just a little story here, the far right is my aunt, behind the little boy next to my aunt is my mom. So now, January 27th, 1945, my mom and the other twins were still hiding in this barracks. They were on the second floor. It was snowing so hard, it was snowing sideways. My mom could not even see out the window because she wasn't tall enough. So one of the older twins says, "Wait, I see something moving." It was the Russians, the Red Army, Ukrainians actually, coming to liberate Auschwitz. They had no idea what they were going to find. So the girls run out and get candy and cookie and milk, and water. And then the Russians say, "Well, we're coming back in a couple weeks." This picture, my mom and my aunt are at the very front, my mom to the left, my aunt to the right, the two ladies in the white are with the Red Cross. But this was not January 27th. The Ukrainians came back somewhere in February and filmed them. My mom, to her dying day, and there's a couple of people here that knew my mom, she liked attention. So when I've seen the video of this, my mom's in the middle. She's not at the front. So I theorized that she saw a camera at the end and ran with my aunt to get to the front of the line. And when you see the video on the 5th take, she stuck her tongue out like a typical 10-year-old. So, and actually they would have been 11 because their birthday is January 31, and this would have been February 45. So now where will they go? They thought, well, age 10, 11, surely they survived. Their parents had to survive, right? So they went back to their farm. Eventually, let me go back one. So to the far right behind my aunt are two girls with hoodies, if you will. Those are the Changara twins. They're the only two set of twins, to my knowledge, that are still alive in the world. Their mother was friends with my grandmother, and their mother came to the orphanage after the war to rescue my mom and my aunt out to get them back to Ports. And so 8 months later, summer of 45, they get to Ports, hoping against hope that they'll see their parents. They get to the house. The only thing that was there was a family dog. My mom would tell you that the Nazis killed people, but they didn't kill dogs. So eventually my mom moves in with an aunt in Cluj, Romania. And to Graham's point about the commencement talk, my mom was desperately seeking affection. She missed her parents. And their aunt in Cluj, my mom would say, "Can you give us a hug?" "No, I don't do that." The aunt had lost a husband and a son. Eventually, in 1950, they end up getting a visa to Israel. My mom, for the 5 years after the war, kept on having nightmares. When she got to Israel, she was in a kibbutz. It's like a commune. All boys and girl teenagers survived the Holocaust. And she said, as soon as I got to Israel, I didn't have any more nightmares. My teacher was Jewish. The farmer was Jewish. The baker was Jewish. Everybody was Jewish. And then I said, well, how was it living in a kibbutz? Boys and girls, teenagers. My mom said, "Alex, it was great. I learned how to say I love you in 10 languages. So in around the late 50s, my mom's twin, at the age of 27, marries a Sabra, a native Israeli. My mom was heartbroken because she wanted to be married, and the boy she was dating, the mother of that boy, had called off the wedding because my mom didn't come from a big family. She had lost 119 family members. So now, This is them in the Army. My mom was in the IDF. She was a sergeant major. My mom was a draftswoman. My aunt was a nurse. So now I'm going to put the story together. We'll get toward the end here in about 10 minutes. So my father was now a pharmacist. He came to visit Shlomo. Shlomo survived, was in Israel working for Mahariv, an Israeli newspaper. My mom would never tell the story in public, so with her permission, I do. So there was no internet dating in 1959 or 60. So my uncle Shlomo put an ad in the paper. My mom saw the ad and was quite intrigued because the family, the boy, the man was from a family of Holocaust survivors. Surely he would understand that I don't come from a big family. My mom's English was 0. My dad's Hebrew was worse. They went on 3 dates. My dad on the 3rd date asked my mom a question. She said yes. He pulls out a ring. They're engaged. So my mom was still in the Army. It took a couple months. So she finally ends up back in Terre Haute. And if you keep track of the T's, she went from Transylvania to Tel Aviv to Terre Haute, of course. So I'm born and I have a younger sister, and I thought we had a normal life. Now, my normal life, I didn't learn English till I was 5 or 6. My first language was Hebrew. When I go back to Israel, I start thinking in Hebrew. If somebody here speaks Hebrew, I'm not 100% fluent anymore, so I apologize. But life was pretty normal. We played tennis, and I thought we did normal things. One of the things, and things gradually kind of became more of an issue, in 1971, 72, around Halloween, kids would throw corn at the house. I don't know what it was like here, and they would run to the next house. Pretty benign act. When they threw corn at our house, my mom had images of her childhood when her dad did nothing. So the next day, she hid behind a tree in the front yard, started chasing these kids around the neighborhood. Kind of funny at first. And then on the 4th day, I remember coming home from a PTA meeting. On our window was, "Go home, dirty Jew," a swastika. I didn't know what a dirty Jew was. I had not heard about this. We didn't learn this at home. And so this quickly escalated, and every night for the whole month of October, 2 Octobers in a row, was a nightmare. My dad would say, "Oh, just leave him alone." And my mom would say, "How can I leave him alone? This happened to me, and I'm not going to let my kids, be exposed to this." On the 3rd year, we moved to a different part of town, and every October, flights to Israel were cheap. So my mom would fly to Israel for the whole month, out of sight, out of mind, and the fun quickly died out. So that's kind of what it looked like at times. And so a couple other little anecdotal stories that kind of shaped my mom's path, as Graham talked about, to forgiveness. In 1978, there was a mini-series, as some of you are aware, called Holocaust. It was on NBC. My mom was not lecturing a lot. She called the NBC affiliate in Terre Haute and said, "I hear you have a movie coming up in a couple weeks. Is this a documentary or is this a movie?" And they said, "Oh, it's a movie. Why are you asking?" "Oh, well, I survived that place. I'm a Mengele twin." "You're a what?" So she explained, and they said, "Well, maybe you want to come to the studio the last night of the series, and on the set of the news, you can talk about your experiences." My mom said, "Sure." So the whole family, my sister, my dad, and I, we go watch the movie in the studio. If you know the movie, the very last scene, a little boy's kicking a soccer ball. I look over at my dad, crying hysterically. Obviously, he saw the little boy in himself. The end of the movie was liberation, and so he quickly saw that, and I quickly understood that he was dealing with a lot of pain. And then when my mom's emotions in check, she gave a really good interview, and I was in high school, and I realized, I needed to kind of help my dad kind of come to terms with his past and encourage my mom to talk and speak. And that's kind of the way things occurred. My dad, very patriotic. Both my parents really embraced being Americans. My dad was a pharmacist, played the piano, went to Purdue football and basketball games for 40-some years. And my mom became an activist. She helped with the Head Start program in Terre Haute. And then in 1984, she found another Mengele twin beyond my aunt living in New York, and they decided they were going to form an organization, because my mom would talk with her twin and this other twin, and they would kind of piecemeal their story together. "Oh, you're experiencing this, so am I." And they thought, well, let's see how many we can find. So as you can see on the slide, they found 122 Mengele twins, 10 countries, 4 continents. And then my mom thought, well, let's go back to Auschwitz. So the following year, we went back to Auschwitz. It was the 40th anniversary. And as I tell many people, I didn't have textbooks about the Holocaust. My parents were my textbooks. And the weird thing for me on this first trip, I knew where everything was. I knew where the selection platform was. I knew where my mom's barracks was. And we had about 8 to 10 twins on that part of the trip. And then we went to Jerusalem to Yad Vashem to have a mock trial of Mengele. My mom was now under the mindset that a lot of the twins were starting to have health problems. Not my mom, not my aunt yet. And so she thought, well, she's going to try to do something on their behalf. And then sure enough, 1986, during Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance, which we're about to commemorate tomorrow and Thursday, she held up a sign in the Capitol Rotunda. The President of the United States was about to speak. Elie Wiesel was on stage. My mom didn't yell, didn't say anything. The sign said, Mengele twins support H.R. Bill 1215. It was for reparations money. And she was in a corner. My mom's 5'1". And so the police officer in the uniform, David Wells, who's become a friend, approached my mom. Ma'am, you need a permit. My mom rolls up her sleeve and says, there's my permit. His commanding officer in the leisure suit starts pulling on my mom. They drag her away. If you've seen the movie Eva A-7063, you can hear my mom screaming, and it always gives me chills. I didn't know this part of the story till a couple months ago when David was in the audience in Baltimore, but they took my mom downstairs to arrest her. And the commanding officer says, let's take her downtown. And David said, no, look at her left arm. She's got a number. You can't arrest her. Gave her a warning, thanks to David Wells. So when you think things are bad, because she came home, she was paranoid, she thought the whole world was against her. Here she was in the bastion of democracy. This is a Capitol Rotunda in D.C. Why would she be arrested for not having a permit? And so she kept on thinking to herself, you know, what else could happen? My aunt in 1987, the same year I had cancer, started going into kidney failure. My mom decides, well, they're going to be identical match. So my mom flew to Israel, donated one of her kidneys to my aunt. When they took the kidney out of my aunt, it had not developed beyond the age of 10 when the experiments were done. So for a couple years, the transplant went fine. And then in 1991, she started developing urinary tract polyps and unfortunately died June 6, 1993. My relatives in Israel were very religious. They didn't give my mom enough time to fly there. So my mom, I can remember her crying, saying, I've never buried a family member. So now my mom probably was depressed, but she didn't really let me know, but she was really seeking focus in her life. She would joke and say, yeah, I not only lost my sister, but I lost one of my kidneys. So a couple months later, she gets a strange phone call from a PhD, a professor from Boston College, Dr. John Mihalchik, who I just got in contact with the other day. And Dr. Mihalchik says, Eva, I know you like to lecture to doctors. Do you want to come to Boston and lecture at a medical ethics meeting? Oh, my mom says, oh, I love lecturing to doctors. Then he said something strange. He said, well, maybe you could bring one of those Nazi doctors with you. And my mom responded saying, Dr. Mihalchik, that's kind of a strange request. Where do you think I'll find one of those guys? The last time I looked, they were not advertising in the phone book. So, oh, you'll think of something, Eva. And sure enough, the last project that my mom and my aunt worked on was for a German documentary company. And in that film, there was a Nazi doctor, Hans Munch, who was at Auschwitz, who was cleared of all charges, who saved something like 20-some Jewish doctors. My mom found out about his story and said, well, maybe he'll come with me to Boston. So she contacted the Munch family, and the response was, well, he'll give you an interview, but he's not coming to Boston. You got to go to Germany. My mom was petrified to go back to Germany. She would get nightmares just hearing the German language. And so she got a Dutch TV crew to go with her. This was 2 or 3 months after my aunt died. And so my mom already had a new focus. She was going to see what Dr. Munch knew about what was injected. What did Mengele inject? Surely he knew because he was working in the same area. So my mom got to Dr. Munch's house, TV crew there. My mom asked Dr. Munch the big question, what do you know about Mengel's experiments? And Dr. Munch says, Eva, I don't know anything. He kept everything to himself. I'm sorry you came this way, but I have nightmares too. My mom said, whoa, you have nightmares? Why do you have nightmares? I thought we were the ones with the nightmares. And Dr. Munch said, well, beyond saving the 20-some Jewish doctors, the other thing was periodically I would stand outside the gas chamber, and when the last body stopped moving, I would sign one death certificate. And he says, I continue to relive this. And then he went on to describe in great detail the operation of the gas chamber, the operation of the camp. And my mom said, my mom was a quick thinker. Dr. Munch, what you just told me here in your living room, you need to tell the whole world. We're going back to Auschwitz in January of 1995 for the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. You need to come with me and tell the world what you just told me. He said, sure, I'll be glad to do that. My mom comes back to Terre Haute, tells me the story, and I said, Mom, no, you don't want to bring Dr. Munch to the 50th anniversary. I don't care what you think. Now I need to figure out a way to thank him. How do you thank a Nazi doctor for doing this? She went to the local Hallmark store in Terre Haute, Indiana, looking for a thank you card for a Nazi doctor. For 2.5 hours. Eva, what are you looking for? Well, I'm just looking. She went to the liquor store. Nothing seemed appropriate. And for months in advance of January of 95, she would think, what could she figure out? What could she do? Then one day she realized what she was going to do in her name only, and I stress that, in her name only, she was going to thank Dr. Munch for doing this by forgiving him. But now she had a dilemma. Her fifth language was English. She would make spelling mistakes. So she prepared a document and took it to her English professor at Indiana State University. Dr. Kaufman, will you read this document? Because I think at some point somebody else in the world is going to read it. I don't want to have any mistakes. Dr. Kaufman read it and said, Eva, you don't have any mistakes, but I think you're forgiving the wrong guy. No. I want to forgive Dr. Munch. That's how I'm going to thank him. Dr. Kaufman said, well, you might want to think about it. So sure enough, on January 27th, 1995, this is my mom and Dr. Munch on the way to the ruins of the gas chamber to do the ceremony. Dr. Munch knew nothing, and this is important because the media misportrays this, misconstrues it. He knew nothing about my mom's thank you about her forgiveness. He told the world what he told my mom in his living room, and then my mom then stepped to the microphone and said, I'm going to thank you, and I'm going to thank you by forgiving you. My mom knew right away that it was a gift to him. She didn't realize till months later that she was giving herself a gift. She despised hearing the word German. She despised her parents. She hated herself for hating her parents. So in her name only, she was going to forgive Dr. Munch, Dr. Mengele, her mom, her dad, herself, and all Nazis in her name. And I get that last part is somewhat hypocritical, but my mom would tell you she didn't want to come 2 or 3 years later and have some other Nazi say, yeah, I was there with Munch and Mengele. I want you to forgive me. She wanted to move forward, and she did this only in her name only. She would never say it was anybody else, just in her name only. I firmly believe that she lived another 24 years of her life because of that. I'll stop there. Thank you very much. So we'll be glad to answer any questions. I apologize that I don't have as many friends here as Graham, but I have my old doubles partner from Butler here.
Alex, Graham, thank you so much for such a heartwarming talk. I didn't expect to laugh, but thank you for that, for reminding us that even in tragedy, there needs to be laughter. So now I'm going to turn it over to you. This is where I'm going to get my cardio. Who has questions?
If you don't have questions, I go to my comedy act. So.
I believe I saw your mother on 60 Minutes. Can you talk a little bit about that program? Because it's really fascinating.
So I think you're referring to the hologram. It's the USC Shoah Foundation Dimensions and Testimony. So the particular program you're talking about, in 1992 or 3, Leslie Stahl interviewed my mom in our living room. In 2014, my mom finds out that the USC Shoah Foundation, which was started by Steven Spielberg, was doing these holograms. And So my mom calls Stephen Smith, who's in charge of the project, and says, I hear you're doing holograms. And Stephen really didn't know who my mom was at this time. And he says, well, it's a very experimental, but yes, we're doing holograms. And to make a long story short, I can go into great detail. My mom, she was not picked to be one of the first 12. She picked them. I'll just leave it at that. So about 6 months later, Eli Lilly paid a lot of money to have this done. So somebody from Indiana would be one of the first holograms. So she flew to Los Angeles, 20 hours of taping. They would ask her anything you can think of. And sometimes what I do with these presentations, I actually interact with my mom's hologram. But it was created, and it was created before she died. So she used to have arguments with herself at candles. She would argue with herself. But it's an incredible, useful tool for all people, particularly kids. It's not really AI. It's my mom's voice. It's my mom's mannerisms and stories. But it's a hologram that I know teachers use. I use it. The first time I did this, I was speaking at Miami of Ohio, and a lady in the front row was passed out. And so it's the program, just to put all together, they did a program with Leslie Stahl again after my mom died and interviewed my mom's hologram. And there was a part there where they interviewed my mom in person, and she answered the hologram the same question. So that was pretty neat.
Who else has a question? Well,
I was just going to add something real quick to demonstrate his mother's level of commitment to sharing her story. When they were in LA on the off day, most of the survivors went to Beverly Hills to shop on Rodeo Drive. His mother went down to the ghettos of inner city LA to talk about forgiveness. And again, it's just, I'll embarrass him, but he's been all over the world the last couple of years doing this. So the families, just an antidote again of showing their commitment to this message.
So I had two questions. I have one for each of you. The first question is, how in the book you talk a lot about, I think, your father's challenges with his own forgiveness and his own, the damages that were done to him emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you know, and versus your mom's much more ambitious.
Outspoken?
Yeah, outspoken. But what went on between the two of them? Because I think that would be difficult in a marriage to have someone so vivacious and ready to take on the world like your mom.
So there's a lot of ways I can answer that. There's no doubt my dad always, he would say, oh, Alex, I keep a low profile. But his story is, I think it's just an amazing story. But he was very reluctant, I'll just tell this part, to even lecture at the museum. So my mom was still working, selling real estate, and she says, Mickey, I know you don't like talking about your story, but just, I need you there 2 days a week. So within a couple of months, his class shows up and says, well, we were hoping to see Eva here. And he knew this teacher, and he says, well, Mike, I'm actually a survivor too. So that was his first lecture that he gave. So just one thing about forgiveness. So my dad was a huge youth sports fan, which you can probably tell. And I'm not going to mention the player's name, but my dad's favorite player at one point played for the Dallas Mavericks, was of German descent, and he loved this player. So one day he calls me up. I was in Baltimore, and he said, you know, I'm going to have a press conference. I go, really? What are you going to do? He goes, well, I'm going to forgive so-and-so. I go, well, Dad, we don't know that his family was involved. He goes, no, it's a symbolic gesture because I see what forgiveness has done for your mom. So he forgave this player. To his dying day, he had the jersey on. After my mom died, January of 2020, there was a Stutthof guard on trial in Germany. Day, DUI, Bruno Day. And so my dad, we have contacts there. They said, wasn't your dad a Stutthof? I said, yeah, well, they're looking for people that were at Stutthof to give some kind of response to what we should do with him. I had no idea what my dad would say. I said, let me give it a couple days. So we come back, family friend and I thought he was going to say he should be killed, hanged. He said, no, in your mom's memory, I'm going to forgive him.
So Graham, you had alluded in your opening remarks about the need for this message probably now more than ever. I mean, with the spread of anti-Semitism and white supremacists and the marches and how ugly it's gotten in so many parts of America. Who are your champions? You mentioned Steven Spielberg a moment ago. Who are your champions that can give you all the financial resources to make this message more broadly heard?
I didn't prompt you to ask that question, but I appreciate it. I mean, with the movie, we need a lot of investment in it. I'd say we're trying to get this story out in so many mediums. And fortunately, his mother has a couple books that she's written. We have this book. There's a documentary. There's actually 2 documentaries. There's one called Forgiving Dr. Mengele, Eva A-7063. And then in this movie. So how do we get this? I go back to talking about young people, right? At least I know with my daughters, they're more likely to go to a theater and watch a movie than pick up and read a book. And so the goal with this motion picture is to have it out at the end of 2027. And obviously we need a lot of investment. So if you know anybody who wants to, knock on wood, the motion picture companies made money in all their movies. The investors we're talking to, that's kind of the secondary goal of this. The biggest goal is to get this message out to as many people as possible. But we have a lot of champions. We have a lot of friends who've helped get this message out via pushing the book. And but he's the biggest champion. I mean, again, I say this, he has a busy life. He could be doing a lot of different things, and he's put up with me. We've had we almost renamed the book A Burden, Not a Blessing, with how we worked it with each other. But I think, again, I go back to a friend of ours, a mutual friend, asked me last fall. They said, why are you involved in these projects? You're not Jewish. And I really hadn't thought about that, because I really do feel like the world is a difficult place right now. And there's so much hatred, like in our own way, what are we all doing to combat it? So that's a long-winded answer, but.
Foundations out there to give you the resources.
We're talking to a lot of different people, so that's one. Uh-oh, here's the toughest question of them all. My doubles partner.
Hey Al, how you doing?
Good.
I'm Joe Weingart, and I went to school with Alex, and we played doubles for 4 years. So
And you
3
probably would think that's a burden, not a blessing
No,
either.
No, I was the burden, but 2 questions for you. Why did your mother wear blue?
Why did my mom wear blue? My mom was very vain. She liked to look good. So contacts were more blue than normal. So she wanted to match herself. Now that's a funny story. The other story, which the orphanage she went to after the war, they wore a veil. Is that what it's called? It was the same color blue. So family friends we go to the orphanage every year during our trip. We give the kids candy and toys, and they all know the story. But all the nuns there wear that blue, and we think that she felt safe in that blue, and it's your blue. Yep. But that's 2 answers. And your next question.
So the second question, I'll preface this that my last name is Weingart, so you can tell I have a German heritage, actually Bavarian, Catholic, and I was raised Catholic. But my family had a farm implement manufacturing company in Lauingen, which is near Augsburg. And the Nazis came to them, they had a foundry there, and said, give us your factory, we'll kill you and your family. And so Willie was put in a concentration camp. He was also rescued by Allies and survived, and his wife and children went to England. But the question I want to ask you is, Alex and I played doubles in the summers several times between our years at Butler, but what was the secret to your mother's grilled cheese that
People know the answer to this.
tell the story?
So when I was 12, 13, we were not very rich. And so all my friends had microwaves, and we didn't have a microwave. And so my mom said, well, I'm going to make you something similar. You'll like it better. So one day she gets an aluminum foil, puts bread and cheese, and gets out the iron. They were called iron sandwiches. And I had then friends coming over. I want to hear about your iron sandwiches. Every now and then I post it. But that was just an example of her ingenuity. And if you see the movie on Netflix, Forgiving Dr. Mengele, that's filmed how she made the iron sandwiches. Good question. I thought that was going to be tough.
Well, on that humorous note, I think it's time for us to adjourn. Anyone who wants to stay and ask questions for a few more minutes is welcome to do so. We hope you'll visit the table over here and buy some books before the movie comes out. So please let's give one more time a warm welcome to Alex Core, Graham Honecker.